What else you can look forward to, Shogun, is our power rankings. This week, we decided to focus on EU, and this is the part of the show, Shogun, where nobody disagrees. Everyone will completely believe everything you say. There will not be a debate whatsoever.
Thanks. Yeah, no, because I got sent the idea of doing this like a few days ago. And I was like, oh, this would be fantastic. It would be great. And then as the day went on, I realized I should never have said yes to this proposition because this is at least over in North America, you've got like decent amount of like a hierarchy. It's like this team has definitely beat this team this many times. And then you look at Europe and you just go, okay, so, this team beat this team. But then they lost to them like 2 days later and they're just sort of tied up at the moment. So absolute nightmare. You're going to be very, very angry with me this one, everyone at home. But my list.
Listen. Not to put any pressure on the situation, but in our pre-production meeting, you did say, quote, 1 through 5 is inarguable.
1 through 5 is perfect. All right, 1 through 5. Anyone disagrees with it, subjectively, you're wrong. And I don't know how you managed that, but you did it well.
All right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to go 5 through 1 and then show you 6 to 10. So let's start with number 5, Shogun. Who do you have there?
Number 5 was a little bit higher heading in, and you're going to like what my next sentence is, actually, Ada, because they were a little bit higher until the grid happened.
What?
I know.
Well,
just because one of the other teams did so phenomenally well that I did have to push them down, but I am going to go with Top Blokes in my 5th spot. They would typically not be this high, but they have just been so unbelievably consistent lately, and they've got the results to back it up. A grand finals placement in the regionals is something that you just simply cannot ignore. And you've also now got to start realizing that what you are looking for in one of these power rankings is now a little bit different to what it used to be, because you need teams that you expect to be able to do this over and over and over again. Top Blokes are one of those teams. Top Blokes will be playing 6 out of 10 on a day, but because they play so well and have so much fundamental skill on their side, they don't need to have a 10 out of 10 day to get through to stage 2. They might need to play a little bit better to get to the playoffs, but they're one of those teams that their play style and their way of going about things is perfect for this new regional playoff style.
So Top Blokes were finalists in regional number 1. They got to the quarterfinals in the grid week 1, and they were out in groups in week 2. But of course, we talked about Archie and his possible connection issues there. My question to you about Top Blokes is this. We mentioned it a little bit previously on the show here, but I want to ask it again. Without giving any spoilers, I wonder what Top Blokes' chances are compared to the rest of the middle of the pack to be a team that rises to number 1 in the power rankings in EU eventually.
All right. So I have already discussed this actually with their coach on Twitter, which went better than it sounds, because typically those sort of things don't go all that well. Top Blokes have an awful tag to them for a lot of people behind the scenes, and that is the tag of gatekeeper. And for those of you unaware of what a gatekeeper is, it is the team that is there to be beat by the team that wins. Sort of the standard bearer of you are really good, but you are not a contender. They've managed to shift that very slightly, especially with their regional finals, but not fully, because they still hit the definition by getting beat by the eventual winners in Team BDS. I think if they want to start moving up, because at one point they were top 4 for me, but if to really break into those top 2, that top 1 spot, they need to be blistering opponents. They need to be dismantling some of the top teams around. That's going to take a lot to do. That means that they're going to need Archie to get more competitive experience. They're going to need the other two to really come together with a lot more team plays. They are going to need more identity, because right now they've got a phenomenal backbone to what they're trying to do, but they need the rest of the meat there that can really take it to these top teams.
As they say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And if the impression of you in the scene is that you are a gatekeeper, that is a very difficult tag to get rid of, no matter what competition you're in. And so for Top Blokes, so far so good, but I wonder if it will take a victory, even getting to the finals of Regional 1, right? Right.
Yeah, it's one of those things of, I don't care if it's a grid, I don't care if it's a regional, I just want to see them win something, it could be at any level. I just want to see, grand finals, them versus an Oxygen or Renault Vitality, any of these sort of teams with them beating them in that grand final. And that would really just unshackle what the expectations of this team truly are.
And I hope they lean into it when that happens too. Be
I
boisterous
want
about
everyone. I want that entire team. Whenever I say these sort of things, I want the team to prove me wrong. And I want the ats to be sent at me. I don't care. If me saying this, lights a fire under any team out there, go ahead. Good for you. I want these teams to succeed at the end of the day. This is not an ego thing. It's just that's where that team is right now, in my opinion.
So if and when Top Blokes win a tournament, send your flame tweets to Shogun on Twitter. Please do.
Yeah, just bunch of gatekeeper, images sent towards me. Be fantastic.
It's completely crashed. So number 5 is Top Blokes. Who's number 4?
Number 4, and this is the team that did end up pushing Top Blokes down to 5, is Vodafone Giants. They are a team that has benefited from this new format the most. Under old rules, they would have they'd already bottled their chance to get into the RLCS. They had sort of done really well during the rival series, and then they had their opportunity, and they did not make it. Now, thank goodness for the new format, because 6 months of this team being stuck in the rival series would have been a complete waste of talent. They are so good. They are so fast. And they've got some phenomenal results to their name lately, especially with their most recent grid victory, taking it over the top of everyone. And they've got something that the previous grid winners, Triple Trouble, didn't have, actually, is that they've got consistent results next to them as well. They've got a bunch of top 8s. They've got a bunch of top 4s. When you throw in a tournament win as well against the names that they did it against, that is where you start to say, hey, we got to take this team seriously. Very much, actually, now I say this aloud, very much sounding a lot like Top Blokes here, really, isn't it? Which is like consistently high results, but now they've got that one result that really pushes them forward a little bit.
Yeah, let's get to that. So Regional 1, the quarterfinal loss to BDS. Grid number 1, they lost in the semifinals to Oxygen, but then we get to Grid Week 2, and they have this epic series. I believe there were how many overtimes? Was it 4 overtimes? 4 overtimes in the final against Renault Vitality, and they squeak out the win. Is it more? Let me ask you about the way that series unfolded. Is it more impressive in a way that they were able to hold on, and they won 3 of those 4 overtimes, by the way, against Vitality in the final? Is it more impressive to you that they were able to squeak out victories and show that sort of resiliency as opposed to it being a more decisive victory in the final?
I think so, definitely, because it answers a lot of questions for the team as well, because you don't know how these teams are going to thrive under pressure. We don't know if we can get them to a world championship or to an international major and say, okay, do it again here. But if you don't see it the first time, you're going to struggle to really convince yourself they can do it a second. So this is a very, very big win for them. It proves that as quick as they can be and as lethal as they can be to play against, they've also got the ability to sort of take a step back and really analyze the field and know that this next goal is the important one. And the teams that you mentioned there, the ones that beat them, BDS, Oxygen, those are not soft losses whatsoever. Those are losses that you take and just go, yeah, you know what? We were kind of expecting this to be like a 60-40 for the other team. If there was a loss in there that sort of just turn around and just go, oh, wow, what is that doing? Then maybe that would lessen their case. But right now, quality wins and quality losses.
So Top Blokes at number 5 off the back of a fantastic regional run. Vodafone Giants number 4 bolstered by a grid victory. Before we get to your top 3, I want to do a little bit of philosophy in terms of how you put together these power rankings. I know we've mentioned the grid at length on this program, and of course we will, because the grid happens every week, particularly in NA and EU. But in putting together power rankings, because it's going to change, the philosophy might change week to week based on who comes onto the show to give the power rankings. For you specifically, Shogun, how important and how much weight is placed upon the grid, particularly at the higher rankings when you're determining your list?
The grid for higher rankings would typically only be used for this is as close as it can possibly be. For anything like top spots especially, it is always better to go off more recent major results, and especially if you can get a head-to-head in those scenarios, then absolutely you put it above and beyond. But if there is a team that's like that close against another team that is that close, that is when I'll go into the grid to sort of maybe separate it.
All right, let's take a look. So recapping, number 5, Top Blokes. Number 4, Vodafone Giants. And now number 3, our top 3. Where do we start?
Number 3, Oxygen Esports. And this is going to get a little bit fun later. I want to explain, some of the other placements. Because Oxygen were truly awful during the first regionals. They will be beyond disappointed. We were speaking earlier on about E United and Omelette, about how they'll think, oh, wow, we should have done a little bit better than that. The idea that Oxygen were out on day 1 should be unfathomable. And even when I say this aloud right now, I feel like I need to go and check my notes to make sure that is actually a thing that happened. Because it shouldn't be. They were a team that were very much in the argument of top 2 coming into the season. But because of that, you can't include them. For my tastes, in that top 2 argument. But what they do have going for them is an excessively solid preseason and continued results in the grid afterwards. So what it can be very easy to chalk up to with that level of consistency is, hey, that was not a bad day, that was an awful day for you. But they happen. Anything beyond that, though, you can definitely see them tumbling a lot more.
So Oxygen, of course, the brand at least new to Rocket League, and a little bit of a merger there between some of the Reciprocity boys. And so, like you said, not the best regional. They were out in stage 1. They had a 17th to 22nd placement in terms of point calculation. Grid number 1, they lost in the final in Game 7 with 3 OT games, 2 triple trouble. Grid number 2, they lost in the semifinal to Vitality, also in 7. So they've had some really, really tough, grueling, arduous series results and appearances. So I guess in terms of one question somebody might have is there's a lot of potential here, right? There's a lot of weight among the players and past performances. The regional wasn't great. So how do we justify putting them in 3rd?
And you mentioned earlier on, it does come down to what someone is considering when it comes to their power rankings. For me, a lot as well, at this point is what I'm considering to be championship contenders. And if I was to turn around to say anyone right now, Oxygen is not a championship contender, I would be laughed out of the building by anyone, really. So they are up there at the championship contender level, but with recent results, they cannot be considered beyond that. And any more bad results, Vodafone Giants would go sweeping right past them. Name value and previous results, especially from the offseason, are about to very quickly become almost entirely obsolete. Not really have any choice but to disclude them from these sort of thoughts and trying to put these sort of lists together. So they need a big result coming up soon. They're going to have an opportunity next weekend. There we go. I know what my dates are. When it comes to the next regionals to try and put everything right. But that has to be a big performance. I think that has to be top 4. Otherwise, they start dropping.
Oh, I love that kind of talk, like putting conditions on, where they have to place in order for these rankings to stay put. That's the absolute best. So in your inarguable top 5, I should say, you have Top Blokes at 5, Vodafone Giants at 4, Oxygen Esports at 3. Now we get to the top 2. Who is your runner-up in your power rankings in EU?
So remember what I said earlier on, that the grid really had to come into play for this one. And I originally was not even going to consider using the grid for this sort of thing, because I thought, okay, this team is set in. I denied over this one for the longest time. I'm going to have to go Team BDS as number 2. They came that close to dislodging Renault Vitality to me. And the reason for that, again, is due to playstyle. Renault Vitality, as good as their name value is, have not been performing at their best lately. Sort of spoiled a little bit, by the way, what number 1 is going to be, but I don't think anyone watching is going to be overly surprised by what the final team on the list remaining is. BDS have got the perfect playstyle for this new format, because what they've got to do, let's say they're going to do what Oxygen did and not make it to stage number 2. They have got to be outpaced and outplayed by these 16 to 32 teams. And a lot of these teams are very much happy to sit back. They're very happy to wait for mistakes. Very little team identity really there. Now, some teams can get caught out by that. Some teams have been caught out by that. But you put that bim bam style of Team BDS against any of these and say, hey, are you going to be able to deal with the sheer suffocating force of this team coming through, hitting the ball off your backboard, taking out your goalkeeper, stealing all your boost? You know, what mistake can you really capitalize on when you're sat there with a card that's barely moving and has got nothing in there whilst they are piling the pressure on? BDS's stock through this style is so much higher than it would have been maybe during a league play season. They'll be so happy with this, plus a regional win to their name. Just the fact that we didn't get the follow-up performance in the previous grid is all that prevented them from me moving them up to number 1. But again, and you said that you like win conditions
yes.
for these sort of things. They outperform, maybe not next week. I don't think the next grid will really have the same weight of it with another regional coming up. But if they can outperform Reno Vitality in the next regional, this could sound very different next time.
Can I give you some hypotheticals?
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Let's see how broken my logic was.
Well, no, I actually want to see how close you put these teams in terms of 1 and 2. So, spoiler, Shogun's number 1 is Reno Vitality.
I know.
You mentioned it already. You mentioned it already, so that's why I'm saying it. So here are the recent results for both teams. BDS won the regional, like you said. They beat top blokes in the final. They got to the semifinal in grid number 1, quarterfinal in grid number 2. Reno Vitality, who many people consider to still be, you know, among the best in the world, if not the best in the world. Regional 1, they made the semifinal. Grid number 1, they made the quarterfinal, and grid 2, they made the final. It was a 7-game series, 4 overtimes. They lost to Giants. We mentioned it already. There's the top 5 you see on your screen. Let's play a little hypothetical, Shogun. Let's say Reno Vitality did not make the final in grid 2. Let's say they had a poor showing in grid 2. Let's say they were out in the quarterfinal, maybe even earlier than that. Would your decision have remained the same?
Depends on where BDS are in comparison. If they were out quarterfinal and BDS made finals, yes. I think that would have shown a level of consistency that, and it might honestly have just been that day that, you know how you sort of say Saturday I've got this team here, Sunday
Sure.
this team's here, and then Monday we might switch over again. But for that moment, Vitality would just not have had the results compared to BDS lately, and they wouldn't have had the performances either, because we've been saying the sentence an awful lot of Vitality looked good, but we know they can play better. And I feel like I've repeated that sentence a little bit too much lately, where you start to not believe it quite as much as you did when you first ended up saying it. For BDS, they have been very consistent in comparison. So, like I said, it is that close. And the fact that Vitality did outperform BDS in the most recent grid made it a lot easier to place them at number 1.
Pilgor RL in chat says Vitality still looking competitive and going deep into every tournament, not ready to dethrone them yet. And I think that's a good point. A quarterfinal appearance, semifinal appearance, and a final appearance in the 3 tournaments, including the semifinal and regional 1, is nothing to scoff at. And really the reason you would look poorly upon it is only because of the cachet that comes with Vitality when talking about them today.
Yeah, they would have come into this tournament number 1 in everyone's books, with Oxygen just behind them in number 2. They haven't won anything between the 3 parts of this tournament that they have been in so far, which they will want to fix very soon, because as that person did mention, you don't want to dislodge them yet, but that's the number 1 spot. That's your winner spot right there. It needs winning performances to go along with it, and right now BDS do have maybe even a little bit more of a claim to that sort of winning spot compared to them. So I would say if we were basing this entirely on RLCS performances, BDS might actually have them toppled at this moment. Maybe even Vodafone Giants might be quite close to them as well, not quite overtaking them. But bringing in preseason as well, with the sort of weight that still holds and how good Vitality were during the preseason, that's what's holding them in number 1.